Quick trigger warning, did you know that most suicides are impulsive decisions made within an hour or less of an attempt? When we talk about suicide prevention, there's often this assumption that people who attempt always have this thought out plan, and that over time they'll slowly work their way from low-level suicidal thoughts to active ideation to suicidal intent. The interventions that we promote have been created with this journey, if you will, in mind. But suicidality isn't always a straight line, and people can jump between different spots on the spectrum, which means that many times an attempt is made during an intense emotional moment by someone who may have not been actively suicidal prior to that point. Or even if they weren't someone who would ever create a traditional plan like we're often taught. One study found that half of participants who had survived an attempt had only considered it for less than 10 minutes prior. And other studies show that even with those who plan, that the actual decision to attempt happens very quickly. The final step from thought to suicidal action thus took place quite haphazardly and was either triggered by a defined event or by an inexplicable impulse from within. It simply felt like it was time. Impulsivity is a very important aspect of suicidality, but it often goes undiscussed. The triggers, behaviors, and thought patterns that precede an impulsive attempt versus a non-impulsive attempt can look very different, and therefore they need to be addressed differently. Understanding various forms of suicide expand and enhance our definition of prevention. Oftentimes when we hear stories of someone who's died by suicide, people share how surprised they were over how suddenly it happened. How can they appear happy one day but then be suicidal the next? But this is actually a very common jump. And instead of treating these scenarios like outlier experiences, we should be educating ourselves on things like impulse control and emotional regulation skills. And we should also be prioritizing certain preventative strategies like limiting access to firearms in order to minimize the risk when someone is in crisis. Easy access to lethal means increases the chances that someone will act impulsively during a tough moment. People everywhere are suffering from loneliness and social and financial inequalities, complex trauma from COVID and other disasters. Under all of these circumstances, it's not surprising that people are having trouble with emotional regulation. But what it means is that we need to diversify our understanding of what suicidality looks like and strengthen interventions that address impulsive attempts specifically.